South Africa's largely unemployed young people have been particularly vulnerable during the COVID-19 pandemic. They'll once again find themselves outside the mainstream economy as companies struggle to recover from the civil unrest we've seen in the week gone by. Youth activist and ANC Youth League member Collin Mdaka says the youth of this country must lead a non-partisan second transition. For more on his thoughts, he joins us now via our video link. Collin, great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. What you're calling for is yet to be seen in this country. So let me ask you this. How do you envision it manifesting?
Thank you, Ayanda, and greetings to all of you at home. So by firstly non-partisan, I mean to say that to separate ourselves from anything that has to do with factional politics, as we've seen that the challenges that the governing party, the ANC, is facing today derives from these factions. And we've seen that the devastating impacts that can have to the economy and to the period that we currently are in as a country at the moment, which is actually dealing with transforming the country to speak to all the aspirations that young people have and address those issues that we see young people always protesting around, all the grievances that the young people have in terms of securing their futures and securing decent living within the country.
If non-partisan is your ideological stance, why be part of the ANC Youth League?
Well, the ANC Youth League, look, it's because it's connected to the history of the country and the history of the struggle. And by being non-partisan doesn't necessarily separate us from the political movement in terms of the ANC. And so you can be a non-partisan sort of like activist and still subscribe to the movement within the context of, say, for instance, the ANC Youth League or any other political party. But what I wanted to address was the fact that, the ideological foundation of the second transition, if I may put it that way, is that it should be embedded in a system where it's built around relationships in a quest for power. And this power then, because the idea is to separate the issue of power and money and the economy, because I believe those are two distinct things. And so when you look at power, for instance, in terms of the architectural framework of the country, you can make better sense of it in a political structure. But when you want to deal with all the grievances that young people are going through, you cannot attempt to address it fully when you only look at it from a lens that is only confined to a political ideology based on, say, perhaps what the ANC Youth League stands for. Because some other young people want the best for the country. And in fact, for instance, when we talk about when we go to the vote, the ANC members only amount to perhaps, say, about 1 million members. But when you look at the voters, it's actually much, much, much more than that. And that tells you that it's not necessarily that you have to be a member of a political movement to subscribe to also their ideologies. And so it's about building the relationships with those youths that are leading in society in terms of their place of work, in terms of their academics, to try and take responsibility and finding solutions that will take us forward as a country. Because if we only going to confine it to being members of political parties, that's where the tensions come in, and that's where the frictions come in and the factions come in.
I guess what becomes the question is whether or not being aligned to any political party or movement is what best places you to drive a non-partisan message. But I'll leave that to you. An ancient old problem, not only in South Africa, but certainly the world over, is trying to convince young people that actually even engaging in the political process is worth their time. Disillusionment is the term that comes to mind. How do we address that particular issue, and perhaps from the vantage point of a young person in this country who obviously cares about these things?
Yeah. Look, young people, firstly, it's all about taking responsibility for your country. And, you know, because of the system of democracy, you cannot effect any change if you're not going to participate in voting. I mean, our constitution is a participatory, I mean, our democracy is a participatory democracy, which means that everybody should participate in all the activities that are put towards creating a better country for all of us. And so really, young people should take that into consideration and take responsibility to making the country better and coming up with ideas and sharing ideas and building institutions that speak to the betterment of the country.
Yeah. Another issue that you raise is what you describe as the original sin in our first transition. That's, of course, from apartheid to a democracy. Yeah. You say it fostered a constitution and social contract that is Eurocentric in nature. What did you mean by that?
By Eurocentric, what I meant was, look, if you look at the history as it is, and not to look at a history as a celebration of heroes, celebration of dates and so forth, but to look at history in terms of the power relationship between those who are governed and those who are in the position of governing the majority. You then understand that it's always been about power, and those who are in power have always looked to protect their power, or have set up systems which will protect the injustices or hide the injustices. For instance, colonization or the apartheid state, which was a legal system anyway. That sort of relationship between the people and those who are in power was set up in such a way that they would hide very well their injustices. And that's something that is criminogenic, and that is what I try to describe there. Because a system of domination in itself is an injustice. And so that is what we're trying to, or what I'm trying to unpack in that instance, is to say those are the foundations of our challenges as a society, where we have a ruling class who has not shown to itself to be willing to let go of this domination. And that is the injustice that we must attempt to deal with in this instance of attempting to go into the second transition. Yeah.
If I understand you correctly, what you've described is an abuse of power. I'm struggling to follow how that's inherently Eurocentric.
Eurocentric in a sense that it's all connected to imperialism. And so I mean, democracy itself, it's something that is derived from, imperialist powers, and how they set up systems that would speak to ruling the population. And so I then connected that to it being an imperialist or a Eurocentric document, because it's then connected to all the other institutions that are put in place to take or to continue sustain this power relation between the dominated and or the oppressed and those who are in that position to carry out that oppression. And all the,
Apologies for the interruption. You know, I sometimes really, even in the midst of conversations like this, I'm reminded of ways through which postulation sometimes leaves the very people we speak about behind. And I'm hoping we'll be able to have perhaps a more grounded conversation around ways of galvanizing the youth behind at least an objective. We saw remnants of this, if you like, in the Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall moment. That gave rise to some political careers where there are current MPs who were activists at that time. And many will gaze upon that and criticize them, perhaps for not speaking loud enough on behalf of young people. Do you think that criticism is well placed?
So criticism is always good because it causes one to self-introspect and find, better ways in which to champion the interests of those that they represent. And so, it's the whole thing about participating. If young people can not just rely on pointing fingers, I've said this before at another time, that it's not about pointing at the river and then saying that this river is dirty. It's all about actually going there and participating and actually cleaning the river yourself, rather than criticizing others who are in that position or trying to represent you. And that's what I'm trying to address as well, to say, let us all take responsibility. Let us all come together in all the spaces that we're in and try and find solutions. And that is what a non-partisan sort of relationships is. In this instance, where young people will come together, share ideas. All these institutions that, for instance, the Black Business Council and other institutions, if they can come together, maybe here's a scenario. Take the Black Business Council, the Black Management Forum, and all these other institutions that represent transformation in the country. How about having them forming some form of indaba or a conference or a think tank where they come together and try to find the solutions together as a group or an institution that represents the interests of society. And that's where young people can then come in and share their ideas, as opposed to criticizing a certain group and detaching themselves from that, because then that takes away the opportunity to find those relationships and build those relationships, which will then give expression to the second transition or a better form of transformation, which is not isolated from the masses.
Collin Mdaka, thanks very much indeed for your take on this. It's great, I guess, to hear from a young person about how we can start thinking about issues that particularly involve young people. I appreciate your insights on the program. Collin Mdaka is a youth activist, also perhaps worth your noting, is a member of the ANC Youth League. Still ahead for you on the program, the Zimbabwean government is moving to rural areas, markets and colleges for COVID-19 vaccinations. Get to details on that story and plenty others in a moment.